In this video, which by the way I'm not sure if my webcam is on or not, we will be discussing the 2026 Senate elections as well as 2028 and 2030 because what I'm going to show to you is how it's going to be almost impossible for Democrats to take control of the Senate anytime in the near future. And they were even saying this after the 2022 elections, that it was going to be very hard for Democrats to maintain and keep their power in the Senate. 2024, Republicans flip 4 seats. They flip Montana, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. Democrats don't actually gain any seats because independents all caucus with the Democratic Party with the way it is now. And many are even saying it was a miracle that the Democrats could even flip the Senate in 2020, which they did by flipping Arizona, Colorado, and both Georgia seats, as well as even though they lost Alabama. And even more of a miracle that in 2022, they expanded on that majority by flipping Pennsylvania. But 2024, they lost control of the Senate, 53-47 minority. And it's not going to get any better anytime soon because even in the biggest of blue waves, I really think it's going to be almost impossible for Democrats to flip it. I guess with a huge wave, it's possible, but all of these political insiders are saying that Republicans are going to have at least 51 seats under their domain. Inside Elections, Cook and Sabato all saying 51 Republican seats at the bare minimum. And it's not hard to see why. The 2024 elections for Democrats were not as disastrous as they could have been. As bad as it was, look at the presidential election. Look at the presidential election. Democrats win Wisconsin, Republicans win Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona. These states still retain their Democratic senators. So it was not as disastrous as, it otherwise could have been. That being said, that also means there's not a ton of opportunities for seats to flip. Not a ton of opportunities at all. And this is a pretty vulnerable map for Democrats. They have 2 real pickup opportunities. In Maine, which is leaning Republican right now because Susan Collins has declared her intention to run. And even though they have some strong potential Democratic candidates, we're not sure how any of them would hold up. Jared Golden probably would have the best chance because he does know how to win over Republicans, but Collins knows how to win over Democrats. Everyone thought in 2020 that Susan Collins was going to lose her seat, and despite, them losing the House, they predicted that the seat would flip Democratic, and Susan Collins won the race. Overwhelmingly, she won the race. So, obviously, looking at Maine, it's even though, it seems pretty obvious that it would flip. Because, again, Maine is generally a Democratic state. Looking at the 2024 presidential election, Maine still votes for the Democrats, and it votes for the Democrats by about 7%. It still, really is tough because Susan Collins is just a tough incumbent. And everyone is saying that Tester lost re-election, Brown lost re-election. They only really kept their seats in 2018 because it was so favorable for Democrats. Susan Collins kept her seat in 2020 in a hostile environment for Republicans, considering that they lost the Senate and the presidency. And North Carolina is really their only other opportunity for a flip. This is actually predicted to be more competitive. Tom Tillis is the incumbent, and he is running, but we are seeing Willie Nickel, a representative, is strongly expected to run. Roy Cooper could also win, and he's the governor of North Carolina that, again, knows how to win over Republicans. North Carolina could be close. But besides from that, are there really any states that have a chance of flipping? there really aren't any states that are held by Republicans that really have a strong chance of flipping. Ohio is pretty unlikely to flip, especially given that they really lost all evidence of swing states. Florida, they're saying, is practically solid at this point, and Texas is also unlikely. We really don't have any other states for them to pick up. Not to mention, the incumbent retiring in Minnesota makes this a bit more vulnerable to flipping, especially say like Michigan that Trump carried. It's a pure toss-up, especially with an retiring Republican incumbent, the Democratic incumbent. Jon Ossoff might have won in 2020. Can he do it in 2026, though? It's a battleground that'll be tough for them to win. Even Virginia could become competitive. They're saying it's solid now. We don't know if Mark Warner is going to run for re-election or if Glenn Youngkin will, which could make it more competitive. Finally, New Hampshire, another potential battleground because even though Shaheen has filed paperwork, Scott Brown, who might have lost her in 2014, will be making another attempt, and we'll see how that goes. Basically, what I'm saying is that even with, this potentially being a blue wave election, although I'm not sure it will be, really, Democrats can only pick up 2 seats. They can get it to 51 to 49 as a best case scenario. That's really the best that they could do. And it could even become worse than that. It's probably going to be 52-48 if I had to predict. So we can go to 2028. 2028, we don't really have election maps up, but we do have some, seats that could certainly flip to Democrats. Wisconsin is certainly a seat that could flip to Democrats. Absolutely possible. 2022, Republicans barely kept the seat by 1%. Are they going to keep it? We don't know. North Carolina, again, another seat that is just always competitive. And even though Republicans usually come out on top, could this buck the trend? So Wisconsin and North Carolina. But there's a lot of vulnerable Democrat seats too. Georgia, Herschel Walker, we all know he's a stronger candidate than Jon Ossoff. Doesn't mean him winning re-election is a guarantee. Nevada and Arizona, also swing states that the Democrats have to watch out for. Pennsylvania fits into this category as well. So Democrats have 4 vulnerable seats right now. Republicans really only have 2. So if you have the best case scenario, 51-49, and the best case scenario in this election, yes, you do get a 51-49 Democratic majority. But what are the chances that that's going to happen are? Like seriously, what are the chances that it's going to happen? I think I just figured out how that my webcam wasn't working, so I put it on. And again, that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario could really be that Republicans have 57, 58 seats by this point because the political climate is more in favor of Republicans, which thus gives them, some of those tougher seats like Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Again, and even New Hampshire, which is up, which could be vulnerable. Again, this is all to say that that 2028, Democrats need to be perfect across the next 2 elections to flip it in 2028, especially because in 2026, the tiebreaker will go to Republicans. So if by some Democratic miracle they somehow flip Ohio or Texas or Florida, they'll still be in a minority. 50-50 was enough for them in the 117th Congress because they had the presidency under their control. In the 120th, it won't be. And again, picture perfect is what they need to do. Now, 2030 is an election that could really see the potential for Democrats to make up some ground. They have Texas, and they also have the more vulnerable Texas seat, seeing as they have Ted Cruz up for re-election. Ted Cruz might have won overwhelmingly in a red wave election, but he won by 8.5%. But don't forget when Ted Cruz only won the election by 2.6% in 2018. I know that that was a blue wave election, but Texas is becoming bluer, and it's only a matter of time before the dam bursts, so to speak. And we see Texas just be a state that is a swing state. I mean, it's only a matter of time before it happens anyway. Like, Texas is going to become blue at some point. So Texas is a possibility. Pennsylvania could certainly flip back. But then again, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, all vulnerable Democratic seats. What I'm trying to say is that it's going to be very tough for Democrats to regain control of the Senate. The way that the Senate lines work, it really makes it very difficult for them because of the fact that most of the smaller states that have more representation in the Senate per capita are more heavily Republican states. Just like in that regards. Again, it's a miracle that 2022 and 2020 Democrats won the Senate. It really is a miracle for them because otherwise they're really, really screwed. And again, look, the House of Representatives in 2026 could absolutely flip to them. Republicans have a slim ass majority. It's slim, and we don't know what the Ohio maps are going to look like or anything along those lines. We don't know what's going to happen. It's very likely that the Republicans lose the House in 2026. But the Senate, I think it's going to be almost impossible for the Republicans to lose the Senate. Again, I'm always going to say this, the 2024 elections for the Republicans could have been a lot worse than it was. That being said, the same way that from 54 to 80, well, Democrats always control the Senate, I think that we have to look at, starting 2024, how Republicans are going to have heavy control of the Senate for, the next while. Because when all these things are in play, you can't exactly be surprised when the Republican Senate remains in force.